No matter how you slice it, it is a bad time to be an airline stock. Delta is down roughly 58%. American Airlines, United, Air Canada, all weirdly down about 66%. Kind of a creepy pattern, but the main point here is that airline stocks aren't down, they have fully crash landed. Regardless of your opinion on airline stocks, I think we can likely agree that the underlying business of air travel is not going away anytime soon. The question is, by buying airline stocks right now, are you getting the deal of a lifetime on giant blue chip companies, or are you buying into a business that will truly never take flight again? I'm Kev from Edge Investments, and today we are diving into the question, should investors buy airline stocks? So here's how we're going to tackle this video. First, we're going to do a quick history lesson so that everybody is up to speed on what has happened to airline stocks over the last couple of months. Second, we're going to look at what airlines are doing right now as they enter essentially survival mode. And last, we're going to try to take all of this information, put it all together, and draw a conclusion about whether or not it is a good time to buy these stocks at what seems like a very cheap valuation. Okay, now this is probably the most research I've ever done for a video. Kind of a new concept, but I think I've got some juicy analysis for you here today. If this is something you want me to continue doing, make more of, the best way to show me is to go ahead and click that like button below. And to go ahead and subscribe and follow if you haven't already. This is not just for my ego. My mom tells me I'm awesome every day. By having more subscribers, this means I actually have a chance at turning this into a viable broadcast business, meaning you will never have to pay me and I will always be incentivized to pump out content like this for you all the time. So go ahead, click that button below. It will take no effort from you at all, and that is truly the best way to help my channel gain cruising altitude. Okay, part one is a history lesson. In case you didn't know, we had a major virus outbreak, which basically resulted in severe limitations to travel, meaning the airline business was really a handful of domestic flights, and that was essentially it. Year over year, as of April, air traffic numbers are down 80%. Ouch. And to make matters worse, Warren Buffett, yes, legendary investor Warren Buffett, dumped all of his airline stocks, sending a shockwave through the industry. To be a little more specific, he sold about $300 million worth of Delta and $74 million of Southwest. He owned about 10% of each stock, so this really hurt the market. Now, these stocks have recovered slightly since then because not everybody agrees with Warren Buffett, but that being said, they're still all down roughly 60%. So the question becomes, if the valuations of airlines have dropped by 60%, has the size of the underlying business fallen by that same amount, or could these stocks now be undervalued? There's a great airline joke that I would love to tell you guys, but I'm afraid it's just going to fly right over your head. Sorry, let's not talk about that. Okay, part two is survival mode. Now, one of the best theses for airline stocks is that they are too big to fail, which essentially means they provide too essential of a service for the government to ever truly let them just go bankrupt and die. Not an unreasonable thing to say, because that was the case with major auto manufacturers in 2008, 2009. That was also the case with the big banks. And sure enough, the government is offering support to the airlines right now. Each of the big four airlines is eligible for somewhere in between $4 and $6 billion in government grants, and only 30% needs to actually be repaid. Not a terrible deal. The interesting thing is that if the government were to give them these full amounts and fully exercise their warrants, the government's going to end up owning a decent chunk of each airline. Really quick summary on what a warrant is, because it is important. Whenever there's a financing done, be it debt or equity, sometimes a deal sweetener is added where there'll be something called a warrant. The holder of the warrant in the future has the option of purchasing shares at what will hopefully be a lower price than what is trading on the market right now. It's the same as a stock option, more or less, if you know what that is, but I'm going to leave it there and cover that in another video. Now, aside from the debt they're taking on, a broker I know sent me the term sheet of a deal that at the time of filming was live, where Air Canada is raising $500 million of equity and $400 million of convertible debt, which is essentially debt that will at some point has the option of converting into equity. Now, why is this important? All you need to know about this is that there is going to be an enormous amount of new shares issued for airlines, meaning that each share that you owned in the past is now comparatively worth less because there are so many more of them. Now, other airlines are facing similar issues because the truth is they're all desperate right now. They're in survival mode. Now, as you can imagine, running an airline is a very high fixed cost business, meaning whether or not you and I decide to travel, these airlines are still going to have to pay to lease literally entire fleets of planes, and at the very least, warehouses to park them right now, meaning they're going to be burning a ton of cash. A decently good investment thesis for airlines is that whoever survives the next 2 years is probably going to come out on top and, I guess, quote unquote, win. It's not actually a terrible way to look at it either. Now, though we've seen a bankruptcy in Latin America, the North American airlines do seem to be sufficiently cashed up that they could weather the storm, unless, of course, there is a significant delay in a vaccine and the airline business will really stand no chance. So that remains to be seen. However, given the fact the government has shown this level of support so far, it would be surprising that for them to not do it again. Okay, now here's the potential upshot. In the 6 months following the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the 2003 SARS outbreak, and the 2008-2009 financial crisis, airline stocks on average were up between 80 and 120%. This situation is quite different. However, that is still a valid data point to consider. I mean, at the end of the day, is air travel going away? No, it is not. Our underlying desire to drink pina coladas on sandy beaches in Mexico is likely going to overpower any of the negative effects, whether it's more expensive tickets, less frequent flights, maybe plexiglass barriers, maybe it's more time in customs, whatever it may be, we're going to make it to a beach. Airline travel will always be a thing, one way or another. However, the simple fact is that these airline stocks are just not going to be worth what they were previously, potentially for a very long time. So if your investment thesis is to buy stocks at these, discounted prices and watch them go back to previous levels in the next 6 to 12 months, I would stop right there and really rethink that. I'm going to give you 3 things to consider. Now, 1, even in the best case scenario, air travel numbers are going to be significantly less than before for potentially a very long time. 2, now that all of these airlines are saddled with debt payments, you can essentially kiss any chance of having a dividend goodbye, at least for the foreseeable future. And 3, between issuing new equity, government warrants, convertible debt, there are going to be way more shares outstanding of these companies. And as I said before, meaning each share you own is now comparatively worth less. The best case short-term scenario, air travel picks up. However, when you remove the middle seat, which is required for social distancing, the best you can do is fill an airline to 70%, roughly 70% of its capacity. At that rate, airlines really can't make money, and it's just not a viable business model for them. That's not my opinion. That's Carl Moore, a business professor out of McGill University. Now, if you listen to the CEO of Boeing, he doesn't even think air travel numbers are going to pick up to even 25% of previous levels by September. And he said maybe 50% by the end of the year. And it could take potentially way longer than that. So let's try to make a conclusion here. For the foreseeable future, airlines will essentially be limping along and trying not to die. Even if airline travel picks up by a somewhat significant amount, it's still not a viable business. The announcement or delay of a vaccine is going to be a very high torque catalyst for these stocks and something that you need to watch. Now, at the end of the day, when you're asking yourself the question, should you invest in an airline stock? You've obviously heard me be very pessimistic. However, I want to make a case for why you should. If you have a really long-term horizon, like we're talking about a retirement portfolio, and you want airline stocks to be one small piece of a diversified long-term portfolio, I say go for it. These are big blue chip companies. Most, if not all of them, will be here in the future, and at some point they will recover. These are definitely discounted prices right now. The government has shown some degree of support to make sure that they stay viable and alive, and at some point in time, they'll likely recover. So if you have, like I said, a long-term time horizon, it's not a terrible bet to make. However, I think you can also see that I'm not overly excited about this. I am, you could say, an impatient investor, which unfortunately is actually a terrible quality of an investor. I tend to make it work. My advice, though, is just add these to your watch list. Sit back, get some popcorn, watch the show for a little bit, and keep a close eye on any significant developments in air traffic number, like significant, not like a little pickup, and look for announcements around a vaccine. I could very well eat my words in 2 months if there's a vaccine. I don't think that's likely, but I truly hope that it happens because I don't like watching people lose money. But hey, I'm not the oracle here. It doesn't matter what I think. In the comments below, I want you to let me know what you think. Are you buying airline stocks? Or are you selling them? So go ahead, subscribe, like, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah.